Hey, thank you all so much for joining another episode of Celeste the Therapist podcast. My name is Celeste. I'm a therapist from the best city in the world, Boston. Oh, you must not be from Boston. Um, where are my? So let you introduce yourself. What is your name and what organization are you
Yes,
from?
yes. So my name is Armand Coleman, and I'm the executive director of the Transformational Prison Project. And even though I'm based in Boston, I actually was born and raised in the best city in the world, New York. New York. I mean, I think that goes unstated as the best city, and saying, I'm saying that after living in both for long periods of time. So,
Whatever. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you. So, as my audience knows, we love to hear stories, and throughout the storytelling, I use points to help interject and educate people around mental health because I think it's important. So, we know you were born and raised in New York, but tell people a little bit about your childhood. Like, how did it start?
wow. So I was born to a teenage mother who just transitioned from the South. She just
How
came from.
old was your mom when she had you?
Mom was 17 when she had me.
Okay.
17 when she conceived me, 18 when she had me.
Okay.
Um, yeah, just like came from the north, from South Carolina. I within a year, and she was pregnant by my father, who was I think 2 years her senior. Um,
Okay.
had me in Queens, New York, in 1973. As you could know, like growing up in Queens, in the city or country at that time, was a totally different animal. So, um, yeah, so it started in Queens, New York, and I was born into a big family. But let me back that up. So I actually spent my first couple of months in Germany because my father was actually stationed in Germany. So I kind of like spent my first few months in Germany,
Oh.
transitioned back to Queens as a child. So um, and I kind of like grew up in a family where even though I had a whole bunch of uncles and aunts, a couple of aunts, like about a dozen uncles around me, I kind of like felt like I wasn't like part of the family, if you will. I was very conscious of the fact, even at an early age, that everybody had the last name Johnson, and I had the last name Coleman,
Did
right?
you have siblings, or were you the
Yeah.
only child?
At that time, I didn't have siblings. My mother later, I was the firstborn, so my mother has three children.
Okay.
Um, yeah, my sister probably about 4 years later. No, my about
Okay.
5 years later, she had my sister, and then another 5 years later, she had my other sister. So, at the time, I was like the only child.
Okay. And then you said you felt distant. So the your last name was from your dad or your mom.
Yes, my last name was my father's last name. So,
Okay.
because my mother was abused by my father, she kind of like separated, came back to Queens, and we moved into my grandparents' house. My grandparents' house was a 3.5 bedroom home. Both my grandparents were alcoholics, and our house actually reflected their addiction. So, and the fact that was 13 of us in the household, I shared a
Oh.
bedroom with four of my uncles, two of whom were heavily engaged in the streets. And the same bed that I slept on is the same bed that they stashed their drugs and their guns in. So I eventually but I looked up to them. I respected them. I loved them. They were like heroes and giants to me. And
Yeah.
I like to basically follow them and always wanted to be like them.
Okay, so you starting off, your mom was young, and then she was in an abusive situation with your father, and then you went to a home where there was addiction. The people that were older than you, so basically your whole environment was surrounded by like trauma. It
Yeah.
sounds like that's the way your life started in trauma.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you remember feeling scared? Like I think when people kind of grow up in that environment, they get used to like the guns and things like around. At any point, do you remember feeling fearful, or do you feel like it was you were desensitized?
Um, I definitely was feeling fearful. I definitely like now I could associate with a lot of feelings that I felt.
Oh,
Always
okay.
I think I was numb, but I actually went through a process where I actually went back, relived my childhood, processed a lot of my childhood, and the feelings associated with it, right?
Yeah.
I could say today like what I was feeling, how I was feeling. That's why I could speak to like never feeling like welcome. Or because I was like the littlest one in the family too. So even though I had a bunch of uncles,
Oh,
everybody was, even my mother was bigger than me. I was like a little runt, if you will, right? Um,
oh,
yeah. So I kind of felt like I remember growing up. I was thinking like, wow, I don't even resemble people in this family. Not only that I don't have the name, I don't even resemble people in this family. So it was a situation where even though I was surrounded by so many loved ones, um, I didn't feel that love. You know.
no, I hear you. And I just want to point out what Armand said about now I can feel those feelings. For people listening, I talk a lot about how the body keeps the score. And a lot of times we're not aware of what we're feeling because we're not taught about our feelings the way we're taught about our letters, right? And so what happens is, regardless of whether or not we want to acknowledge what happened, our body does. So I'm sure there's a lot of times where that emotion, you feel like you're back into like that little boy sleeping on the bed and
Right.
all of that like trauma. So that tends to happen for people that may not be aware of that part. Um, Now, you were the youngest. Did they treat you kind to the like did the people, even though there was a lot of things going on, were they kind to you, the people in the home?
No, I don't think so. I think and
Okay.
like, again, my feelings. The only one I remember ever being kind, loving, nurturing to me was my grandmother. Right.
No, oh, not your mom either. Your mom, no?
Not even my mom. I would say that I know she tried. I know she did. But I had like several incidents in my childhood that were traumatic, that involved
Mhm.
her. Um, and I think for a while after I kind of like blocked that out. I think I
Mhm.
mean I had like several. Like I said, I understand now that she was a teenage mother. She did the best she could do. And
Right.
she was, my father wasn't. So a lot of us, and I was her first. So it was not like a
Mhm.
lot was going down for her, you know. And they
Mhm.
was like, they just came from the South, escaping the Jim Crow South. So um, I didn't know all this then. But yeah, I didn't feel loved even by my mother. I think my grandmother was the only one I actually felt loved by, and it's a lot that led up to me like getting that feeling. It's not just me just saying it. So
Oh, okay, okay. Now, you learned basically the people you looked up to were in the streets. Did you? Sounds like you found yourself kind of mimicking your environment.
yeah, definitely. One of my uncles, he's like a well-known person even to this day, like in the streets of New York, if you will, right?
Mhm.
And the country. And he had the bright idea when we were younger. This was like at the height of the crack era when crack first started. He had the bright idea that like it was me, him, um, three of my other uncles, and he had the bright idea that we would have like a all family drug block. And because I was like too young, literally my job was to like stand on the corner and like watch out for the police, run back to the house,
Okay.
bring them to the block, and I was like, I don't even know, because I had to be like 10, 11, and
Yeah.
literally I joined the family business or his business, I should say, um, at an early age, and I kind of like when I look back at it, a lot of stuff that I learned because I became my environment, but a lot of things I learned I actually learned in my house. I didn't learn them in the street.
Right.
From my family, I learned them in my bedroom because they had a bird's eye view of what they was doing, how they was doing it, and I was in the presence of what the street would consider the best ones in the streets. So it's kind of like I got to see it at a high level,
And it what? Say that last part again.
and it impacted me. It had a
Yeah.
serious impact.
Yeah. So you pretty much learned everything that you started doing on the streets in the home was part of the business in that way. Um, did you witness anybody in the home go in and out of jail, or were people mostly out? Oh, you did. Okay.
My two uncles, like I shared a room with four of my uncles. Two of them was closer to my age. Two of them was they were adults, but to me they were adults. They probably was in their early 20s, late teens, and they were known to go in on a regular basis. So I witnessed them go, but back then time was as time is now. They were going for a year. They going for and they come back out and they just go back at it again. And that's still what's transpiring today.
With your family. Okay.
with one of my uncles anyway, the primary one that I'm speaking of. Yeah.
Okay. So now you're witnessing your uncles kind of go in and out of jail. This is the only life you know. You really don't know any other life at this point. This is what you were born into. So you know, you like your story is one of those stories where it's like, wow, like you were really dealt a bad hand. Like you didn't have any control
Mhm.
over your life. You didn't have control over what you were exposed to. And so you began to do some of those things on the streets as well. Now, prior to us, your birthday just passed, and I said to Armand, I said, "Oh wow!" Like he said, I don't usually celebrate my birthday, and then you shared a memory of
Mhm.
when you were 15, going to turning 16. Can you share that with the audience,
Yeah.
please?
So like I said, I kind of like had a quick injection into the street. So I was in and out of juvenile a lot. Not only in and out of juvenile, that was put this way. I was well known to the police. I was well known to the police. So if I got arrested today, my uncle would come pick me up tomorrow or tonight, and make sure I go in his custody. And the police knew that like they really was like I was known to them. So one thing they did to me was I remember was May 10th, 1989. They arrested. They kind of came in. I wasn't even doing anything, so I wasn't like really worried about it. They came and arrested me. It was like 10 o'clock at night. They came and arrested me. They put me in the back of a car and they made the rounds throughout the neighborhood, like arresting different people. And they just held me in the back. And then I remember at midnight, or a little bit thereafter, the guy turned and looked in the back to me. He said, he was like, "Yeah, now you going to the big house." And I was oblivious that my birthday was even the next day. But this guy actually knew that my birthday was May 11th, and he actually locked me up until midnight. I mean, excuse me, he waited to midnight to book me, I should say, so I could be processed as an adult and sent to Rikers Island. And he verbally expressed, both of them verbally expressed that they hope that I got raped, they hope that I got killed, they hope that I got stabbed. Um, yeah, and that kind of like had a, you know what's so crazy for me? I recognize that as a turning point in my life because up to that point, because you asked me about fear earlier, right? Up to that point, I really had a fear of going to Rikers Island. I really had a fear of going to Rikers Island, and I think I was there for like a couple of days. Because I didn't get my, they didn't just call my family and they picked me this time. It was different. I had to get arraigned. I think it was like a weekend or something like that. But I ended up spending like 2 or 3 days there, and nothing happened to me. I navigated that environment with ease. The people that I know that were incarcerated was either people that I victimized or people who worked with me to victimize others. And I navigated that with such ease that I was embarrassed when I got out. That I was scared all those years to be in prison. And I literally that took a mentality that I'm never going to be scared again. And it kind of made me worse. It made me worse. I mean, so yeah, I kind of like recognize that like, as a crucial moment. Um, um, yeah,
Okay, that makes sense. So you got out after that. And then at some point you ended up back in prison more permanently than before. Um, Tell people when that took place.
yeah. So if you would allow, I'd like to go back a little bit, right?
Yeah, of course.
So when I was 5 years old, like one thing my family always like expressed and valued was the concept of not snitching, right? You don't
Hmm.
tell members or anybody for that matter. That was like literally like something that my household um, really expressed. And I remember when I was 5, I actually made the mistake of snitching on my uncle to my grandfather. And my uncle actually, and it's kind of make me more. I don't know. I've been thinking about this all week, so I don't know. I'm getting emotional, but my uncle actually hit me in the back of the head with a brick for snitching on him to my grandfather. Um, And I remember the first time I ever went to the hospital, my aunt took me to the hospital. Um, I had to get stitches. And I remember my mother came to the hospital. And this is one of the things I was telling you about the compounded incidents with my mom, right? My mother comes to the hospital, and I remember she was inquiring, would be like, "What happened?" And I explained to her what happened. And I remember her telling me, she was like, "Yeah, that's why you don't tattle." She's like, "That's why you don't tattle." And I was like, and like to this day, like I can't remember like the brick hitting me, but I could actually remember like the pain of those words. Like those like really, really stuck with me. And and even though like I processed it 100 times, 1,000 times probably, it still like gets me emotional just to think about it. And I only tell you
You
that
were 5?
I was 5 years old. I was 5 years old. And I only tell you that story because I think at that time I actually learned my lesson. that you don't snitch. And if you snitch, I guess it's okay to get hit in the head for snitching. And if I fast forward to like 12 years
Sorry,
later,
can I just pause for 1 second because so for people listening, I think being so young, and what Armand is saying, like he was taught, it's not like it's like between literally being told, having the physical ramifications. He learned that talking about what somebody did is wrong. So regardless of if it's harmful for him, it's just like we don't do that. Over at five, man, I just that's a lot. And then when he said what my mom said hurt more, and I think that unfortunately, especially in the Black community, I don't think we understand how much that lack of emotional connectedness affects us.
right?
Because somebody else would be like, "What, a brick?" But no, it's like those words, and then from your mom. So like she was there, but she wasn't there for you. So you learned how to like figure out how to fill that void, and um, it didn't sound like by any way that like helped you excel in life. So
No,
that's really hard to hear.
yeah, I think it was like the opposite. And like I told you before, I was already dealing with insecurities because I really already felt like I didn't belong in the family, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And and that's her brother. I'm her son,
I
right?
know,
She was choosing her brother like over her son.
I know.
At the time, she was like you just said, she was the only person I actually had. I didn't have my father, my sisters then wasn't there yet, so it was kind of like really intense.
Mm. So then, now I don't snitch. So you go
Yeah,
through life not
yeah. So
snitching.
that concept, and I had an extreme approach. And like I said, if you fast forward like 12 years later, 11 years later, I'm in Boston, and somebody snitched on a family member of mine, and I literally like repeated that childhood event where I actually hit him in the back of the head with a bullet, with fatal results. He was only 18 and I was 17. At the time, I didn't know I was living that out. It wasn't until I actually started getting involved in like RJ restorative justice programming, and I had to process my crime. And somebody asked me like, "Why did you take that extreme view? Why did you take that extreme position? Like, what was the first time you ever thought about that?" And I literally had to take them back to that childhood incident, which I have forgotten, by the way, which I have forgotten.
Wow.
Back to that childhood incident, and I was like, "Wow." That's what made me realize, like, yo, all the stuff that I was living out, all my criminality, all my negative destructive behaviors was literally manifestation of things that happened to me in my childhood. I was just living them out as an adult.
So now you're 16 or 17 at this point. Was how old?
17.
17. So 17, and then how much time did you get?
I was sentenced to life in prison. So I
Your
was sentenced
sentence to life.
to prison. I ended up doing 28 years. Again, prison did nothing to change me. All it did was compound onto the traumas that I had. And as a result, I ended up spending like 2 decades in the most violent environment that Massachusetts had to offer, the most extreme prison environment, which is the maximum security. I spent 2 decades there with over 12 years in segregation.
Segregation means what? Like the whole?
Yeah, it's like isolation, the whole 23-hour lockup.
You said 12 years in the hole?
Yeah, 12 years.
Was why how come you ended up in the hole so long?
Um, it was a combination of who I was, what I represented, and the fact that I was considered like a security threat group person. But for when I was incarcerated, I actually became actively involved in something called the Nation of Gods and Earths, which actually taught you that God's within you, God's not without you. And they actually deal with a level of civility, mathematics. But it became a time when the Department of Corrections labeled that entity a security threat group, and
Oh,
so they was considered like just the same as a gang, if you will. And we was
oh.
right besides gangs, and because I refused to renounce, I told them I would never renounce my God-centered culture. They segregated me for it for that long period of time. they eventually was sued and they settled out of court. And they recognized that the nation of God on earth was a legitimate path um, to God. So, but prior to that, anybody who was in the Department of Corrections from '95 to 2005, they had to be subjected to segregation, or they had to renounce they what would be considered their religion.
You when you were 17 and the judge, said life in prison, did you think that you would either die or end up in prison anyway? Like, were you surprised?
I'm gonna be honest with you. When I was 17, I didn't believe I believe. I, I was just having this conversation with somebody yesterday when I turned 49, May 11th. I was like, I never thought I believed lived to be 21. Then I didn't think I believed to be 30. Then I was
Hmm.
like, I definitely lived to be 40, and I'm almost 50 years old today. So, but to your question, that I didn't think I would die in prison. I was delusional at that time. I was still a child. I think I wasn't able to process it. Something
Hmm.
that really told me that yeah, you're gonna get out after 8 years. I've always go around saying it to people. Yeah, I'm gonna get out after 8 years. I'm gonna get out after 8 years. Like no reason to rhyme behind it. But it might
Yeah.
get out after 8 years. And 28 years later, I was still in prison.
So after 8 years, like when you like, at what point did you like, oh, this is for real? This is like where I'm gonna end up forever.
Honestly, before I even got to my 8th year mark, I remember like talking to this older guy that I know in the prison, and I was telling him about my 8 year theory. He's like, why the 8th year? Why can't it be 8 years in like 300 days? Like 8 years and four. And I mean, I was like, oh wait a minute, that
Hmm.
makes sense, right? But anyway, um, it took me a while before I actually started to take it serious. It took me a while before I actually started to take it serious. And I really didn't have a chance to ever get out of prison until like 20 years into my incarceration when I actually started getting involved restorative justice, and it was mostly because of the environment I was in. I was in a maximum security environment. It breeds violence every day. It doesn't breed transformation. It doesn't breed um, correction. None of that. It's like a total desolate land where you at. So there was no hope there.
So 20 years you're in. What makes you decide you want to get involved in a restorative project? And tell people what that is.
Okay, so the Transformational Prison Project actually came from something called the Restorative Justice Group. Restorative
Hmm.
Justice is a program that was created by men in prison, and it was created for the purpose of bringing healing to themselves and other men in prison.
Hmm.
A restorative justice is like an indigenous practice. It's a circle process, and the primary concept is like to do no harm, and to
Hmm.
actually be able to process people in a way that could bring healing and connection. And this was a process that actually started by men, all of whom were serving life, by the way, um, in MCI Norfolk. So when I came to Norfolk after like 20 years in the maximum security prison, people who I looked up to, mainly my co-defendant and cousin, Supreme Hassan, and a few other men who I respected and loved, they were already engaged in restorative justice.
How
Uh,
did you end up getting out of maximum prison to MCI Norfolk?
um, One day they just told me, "Yo, you pack up, you're leaving." Well, they just told me pack up. They just told me, "Yo, pack up, you're leaving." And I left. I mean, they didn't give me no pre-warning or anything. They just said, "Yo, you're leaving one day," and I left. So they literally plopped me from a maximum security prison to a community minimum security prison. I'm gonna be honest with you, the difference that it's kind of like for me the comparative analysis of being dropped from a maximum security prison where you're locked up all day, right, to a medium security prison where you're not locked up all day. There's no locked doors, none of that. It's like the same difference between coming from that prison to coming to the street. That's how extreme the shift is.
Oh, wow.
Um,
Wow.
but I had a lot of people there that I knew over the years. A lot of people, like I said, that I respected. They literally like held my hand and walked me through that whole integration into the medium security process. So
When you say people you respected, you mean from the streets?
I only knew probably one person from the street, and that was my cousin and
Okay.
my everybody else I knew from incarceration.
Oh, okay, but they weren't a part of that project at that when you knew them originally.
No, it was all we were all in the mix together.
Oh,
They was one
okay.
of the fortunate ones that transitioned from maximum security quicker than I did, decades
Got
before,
it.
and they just
Oh,
had a head start, if you will, and working
okay.
on the medium security prison.
So now you're over there, you're around people that you have respect for. So that again, environment matters, right? So you're in a new environment that doesn't mimic anything, not even your home life,
Right.
um, um, or the last 20 years in prison. What was that experience like for you to go through the process and start working on your healing journey?
I'm happy you said that because remember I told you earlier that I took a position like to never be scared after I went
Hmm.
to the only time I was ever scared my whole time after that was when I had to go to RJ. I
Go
literally
where?
had to go inside a restorative justice group and actually speak um,
Dang.
crime to what happened to me. That's the only other time I was ever scared. My whole and I did and like I said, I've seen everything that prison had to offer. That's the only time I actually was afraid, and that's what made me do it.
Dang.
That made me do it.
Dang.
I'm not, and I actually recalled that prison experience. Like I was scared for no reason. I was scared. I went in. I navigated with ease. But something told me, yo, you can't be scared to go into a restorative justice space. You have to jump in there, head first. And I was in it with a lot of. I was fortunate that I came there at the beginning of the process, so I was able to take advantage of all the programming. Meaning, I was literally first in line,
Mhm.
first to do this program, first to do that program, and everybody else was scared too. Not everybody else was scared too, but I was like, no, no, I was the boldest. I would say, and actually like jumping into it, and I benefited the most from it.
It's crazy. I could see you've always been a leader, but you weren't led by like obviously in a healthy environment. But when Armand says I was scared for no reason, I will say that there is a reason why you were scared. It's because that was a foreign like idea to your system. Restorative healing, like none of that was any part of your vocabulary or your mindset. So
Mm.
if we were talking about something different that you've been doing, that would have been more normal for people that may not understand. Like, why would you be scared to heal? It's because I've never even knew I need healing. I just thought this is what life was.
Yeah,
So it makes a lot of sense how you ended up feeling nervous about it. Does that make sense?
that makes perfect sense. Let me share another one. Like I
Mm-hmm.
remember saying to my, I'm gonna be honest with you, like that time, 8 years, this was 2013. I
Mm-hmm.
never, I didn't even believe in trauma. If somebody would told me you gotta speak to it, I would like that doesn't that's not real, dude. I literally in my mind
You
believed
didn't
that was
even know you went through trauma.
exactly. I know I didn't even believe it was real. I thought it was something that white people made up to justify their behaviors. Real talk.
Damn.
And then one day I remember I was in a group and somebody gave me this thing called risk factors that youth encounter that can make them advance into criminality. It was a
You
checklist.
hit all of them. You hit
Yeah,
all of them, right?
I remember checking them, and I checked one except having a parent die and being sexually assaulted or raped as a child. And I should have checked being sexually assaulted or raped as a child, but I didn't have the courage to do it. And that's what really like opened my eyes. Like, wait a minute. And now remember, I'm in a room with a bunch of other men. The guy to the left of me, he was incarcerated. He was a white guy, way older than me, and he was incarcerated for murdering his whole family. The guy to my right of me, a youthful offender like myself, and he was incarcerated for a double homicide. Right, and literally, I peeked at their list, and they had less than half the list they was checking on. They both was white, and I was like, that's what made me think, oh snaps, wait a minute, something. That literally moment clicked in my mind, like, yo, something's here. I need to
Yeah.
look into this. And from that moment, I really took it serious.
Wow. So, the reason why that was powerful for his system, I love teaching people about this stuff because I get it, but I've been doing this work for so long. And sometimes when people are listening to this, it's the first time that any introduction of mental health. I thought therapy was for white people. I tell people that all the time. Like it's a miracle that I'm doing what I do because I didn't think it was something that we did. Which is why I go so hard. But when you pause, write it down, and make it plain, your system gets clarity. And so for him to see it on paper, it's no longer in his mind. His mind is all clogged up with just years and years of trauma. So it's hard to decipher because your intellect is there. You're very smart. You're a leader, but you didn't have an environment to allow you to condition who you really were. And so, like being able to write that down and look at it, it made you, it made something click. Clicks was happening so quickly for you, and it's like, dang, imagine if it was different, you know.
Right.
But in the right environment, like things started to make more sense.
Wow.
So, does that make sense?
That makes sense because that was the first time I ever did a writing. I forget what they call it, but a writing assignment with
Hmm.
a. However, every single, like I said, I went on to become the leader in a leader in the RJ program along with my rest of my team.
I'm not
How
surprised.
size that we had this group called the Victim Offender Education Group, right? And it's a 34-week program to take you from your crime to a survivor panel where you sit in the presence of people who lost family members, right? But
Dang.
you have over a dozen writing assignments. You literally, like you just said, you had to write stuff down. You had to write.
Hmm.
The first assignment is what happened to you in the day of your crime in detail, and events leading up to it, and you had to write it down. The first time I ever wrote it down, anything, if I even spoke to my crime was that day, but to write it down and then having to speak to it, it like took on a whole another level.
Whole
So
nother level, yeah. It's
perfect.
different. Because it's not inside of your head with all that other stuff. So, so you're doing this restorative project, and at what point did you start working on the transformation prison project? Because that's pretty amazing.
Yeah. So MCI MCI Norfolk is like kind of like different than any other prison I've ever been in. Is that they encourage like prisoner leadership.
Hmm.
So many of that prison was able to like to start something called a restorative justice group, and then we put together what's called a restorative justice retreat, and a lot of people started to take note of it. A lot of people started to take note of it. We had an external team of volunteers to come into the prison and work with us, and people were saying like, "Yo, we would support this. Can we get money? Can we do this? Can we do that?" Um, um, our external coordinator literally like we sat down and we said, "You know what? We need to start a nonprofit," and we came up with the Transformational Prison Project. Many
Wow.
ways, and literally like the Transformational Prison Project ended up blossoming from the work of the Restorative Justice Group. And I remember when we sat at the table, we said, and this is crazy. Remember, it's 9 men, and you have a woman who's an external coordinator.
Yeah.
Um, and we literally said one day we're gonna come home and run the organization, but everybody in there, with the exception of one guy, was serving life.
Oh, but you had hope, or like
Yeah,
when you,
exactly. Yeah. It was like,
okay.
and I'm gonna be honest with you, that restorative justice gave me hope back. When I started doing that work in there, I remember saying to my team, like, "This is gonna be the thing that tear the walls down for us in these prison houses. Be the thing that tear the walls." I know people look like I was crazy, but literally, just I don't know. You are in Massachusetts, you know. Massachusetts had not issued a a commutation in 25 years. Just a month and a half ago, the first commutation ever issued by the government was issued to one of our founders of this program. He was serving a natural life sentence, never going to get out, and they gave him a commutation. And they commuted his sentence to a second-degree life sentence, and he's out today. Within a month and a half,
Wow.
which is like a miracle in itself. Um,
Wow.
he was like one of the leaders. When I left, he's the one who he took the helm and he became the leader of the organization for the last 2, 3 years, and now he's out. And the
Wow.
like I can't believe it. Like this guy literally was serving a natural life sentence 3 months ago, and now he's out here in the street right now, working and doing great work with us. So amazing.
Wow, that is amazing. I'm sure while you were in, because I want to get to how you got out, but while you were in, um, the community, you started to hear other stories like yours, right? It was you know, a lot of people had similar or worse stories than you did. I'm sure. Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely. And I'm happy you asked that. Because I'm actually asked that question.
Hmm.
But one thing that made me go as hard with restorative justice when I had that chance is that
Hmm.
for a fact, no matter where I go in the world, I was
Yeah.
have a group of people who related to me in the way that think about it. I was in a group with 13 men, all of whom were serving life sentences except for one, all of whom have committed one or more homicides, all of whom was incarcerated for long periods. We all had like a unique string of histories between us, and they all correlate. I knew for a fact. I don't care if you could take me out of here and put me in the best therapeutic circle you want to put me in. I would never find a community that could relate and connect with me like those group of men. And I knew that. And I knew that. I said I want to take full advantage of it before I get out. You know?
So, with you not feeling connected, feeling different, growing up, this was like the first time you actually felt like loved and supported, and like you was a part of a community.
Yeah. And I also felt that people were suffering. I feel like I wasn't the only one suffering either.
You wasn't the only one suffering. Yeah.
The people that I looked up to, people I respected, had the exact same hurts, the exact same insecurities, the exact same traumas. Help form them. So that in and of itself was a
What part of being like a black man do you think plays a role in other black men just kind of struggling with that emotional piece?
um. I don't think I understand your question,
No,
but
it's okay. I'll ask it again. Like, do you feel like, I feel like men in general uh uh are not given grace for having emotions like crying, or do you think that played a role also, especially year round, like for uncles who are in the streets, and
you know,
what part of that do you think that played with you smothering your own emotion?
oh yeah, I think two things I've seen it happen prior to incarceration where I was taught that you definitely don't cry. One thing that my family always called me was like they used to call me. I used to cry easily when I was a kid child, and
Oh, okay.
they called me. Even my mother, this was a crybaby. But I literally remember that growing up. And when I got older, I never. The first time I cried as an adult was when I went to MCI Norfolk, more than 20 years into my incarceration. When I went to that restorative.
Damn.
But to your point, the first person I ever see, I was just talking to a lawyer about it the other day. The first person I ever seen cry, and literally he was crying in a circle in the prison. In my mind, I was like, "What the hell's going on, dude?" Like, yo, I was like, "Yo, it's about to go." I was thinking that violence was gonna happen, something's gonna go down, and he cried, and then it was over. I was like, "Oh snaps!" Like, he cried, he told a story, he cried, and he did it in front of a bunch of men, and nothing happened. For me,
That
that
was hard for you to see because you ain't never seen nothing like that before.
That, but it came to the point, Celeste, that the first time I ever cried, I cried in a group with my team, right? When I would,
Hmm.
I like to say my restorative does circles, but the first time I ever cried like public tears was like 3 years before I was 2 years before I was released. Actually, it was so big for me that I actually wrote an article about it. I mean,
Wow.
kids of justice. The first time I ever cried publicly and openly in a group, and it was big for me to do that. It was big for me to do that. And one thing that helped me do that, to your point, is that in the positive realm is that like people that I like for instance, when I was seeing that guy cry that day, I thought something was gonna happen. It didn't happen, and I
Mhm.
realized that I didn't lose respect for him because he cried. The people
Mhm.
didn't lose respect for him because he cried. I actually
Mhm.
respected him more. I was like, damn,
Mhm.
wow. You know what I mean, and I was like, that was what made me like, okay, it's not. I mean, I still didn't have the courage to do it yet.
Yeah. That's
Like
good for you, but I don't know about me yet. I gotta hold off and check it out a little bit more.
I realized I didn't lose no respect for him, and I
Wow.
realized people didn't lose respect for him. It ain't like people thought less of him because he was crying, and I was like,
Mhm.
oh, okay, and it kind of like changed my whole dynamic.
Again, back to environment. Environment matters, and for people listening, and with my clients, sometimes like the guys, they'll be like, "Oh, I got something in my eye." I'm like, "Okay." Um, or any all of my clients, I didn't expect to cry. Or I said crying is a part of the human experience, right? It's therapeutic. It's
Mm-hmm.
a natural way to release. um you know you have uh, your story is full of like loads and loads of trauma. Imagine how stuck your system was, clogged up. Your system was very clogged up. It can affect us physically, mentally. So once you start crying, a little bit release happens. Once you start writing, releases are happening. So for people that may feel like you feel, and feel like, what, I don't usually cry, I just hold on, don't let release. It's okay, right? It's okay.
Yeah,
um
I used to always say, I forget who told it to me, but I never forgot. I always say that all the minute, like I say, everything needs water to grow, even people. You know what I'm
Oh,
saying?
that's good. I love it. I never heard
So,
that before.
and the thing is that once I started crying one time, I started crying all the time. I was like, what the hell? I
But
started
you
like So what you said about being clogged up is real. I was like, yo, why am I crying, dude?
You real clogged. You was clogged. Like,
Right.
um,
So it became cultural, and the thing with me, like one thing about me in these prisons and being in the maximum security for 2 decades, my arrival to medium security was right on time because and prime for like the leadership role because I had a reputation that was beyond reproach. Everybody respected me in the system for the wrong reasons, for the
yeah,
wrong reasons.
yeah.
But when I'm doing right, and like everybody has a stigma against restorative justice, against crying, against the things we were doing, but they were like, yo, they couldn't say nothing because they're like, well, if he's doing it, they respected it.
Wow.
Me crying was a big deal for me, especially amidst all my peers. When I was inside, myself, Eric, Bobby, and Noble, as well as the guy who just got out, that was telling me about who had a commentation, we actually led a program called a restorative justice program called Young Men Exclusive, and it was I was the older amongst them, myself and Thomas, who just got out, but our duty was to actually deliver restorative justice services to the men between the ages of 18 and 30, the youngest demographic that the prison had, right?
Wow.
So and they all looked up to me. So like when I had my first public tier experience, I did it in front of them, and I was like, yo, I knew I had to let it go because I know they was having um,
Yeah.
the same stigma against tears that I had, and they was.
Yeah.
But even when I did in that space, they all embraced me. They all
Wow.
embraced. Me. Even some of them came to the point where they felt like free enough to actually like to do the same.
That's so good. That's beautiful.
Beautiful moment. It was a beautiful moment.
Yeah.
Like I told you, it was so beautiful. I felt like had to memorialize it.
Yeah. Now you got life, but you're here. We're talking. You're on this podcast. How did you end up getting out?
Wow. So, as you know, okay, so in 2013, the um, the United States Supreme Court passed a law that it's unconstitutional to give children life throughout the public
Hmm.
role. So every state had to adapt and apply that legislation. Some states like down south and some Midwest states said, okay, you don't have life anymore. You have 80 years. You don't have life no more. You got 75 years. But Massachusetts, at that time, was under the leadership of Deval Patrick, and Deval Patrick, he took a different tack. So, but the beautiful thing about this is that before 2 months before Massachusetts applied Miller versus Alabama law, he came and sat in a space with me, another guy who's youthful offender, and the restorative justice group as a whole. And he sat with us and we talked about like, yo, dude, I've been in stuff. He was like, yo, you were in with 17. He literally got proximate to us, I would say. We had a powerful circle. And 2 months later, Massachusetts, under his leadership, went further than any other state in applying Miller versus Alabama. They literally said anybody who's locked up right now for committing a crime as a child, um, you qualify for parole. Period.
Oh,
And if you serve more than 15 years, you qualify for parole, period. And he even went a step further and said he raised the age 1 year to under 18.
oh,
So that allowed somebody like myself, who was 17 when I committed my crime, to qualify
yeah.
for services and the like. And were it not for that, I wouldn't be out. So, and not only that, they went further and they said they passed a positive law saying that youthful offenders should have the best possible opportunity at parole.
Okay.
That means I was able to get a therapist. It probably wasn't Celeste. You know what I'm saying? But
Mhm.
I was able to get a social worker. I was able to get a lawyer and any of the forensic expert that I thought I might have needed to prepare for parole and to prepare to get out. The state would provide it for me.
Wow. Wow, that's amazing. So you start this program in there with hopes of getting out. You get out, and then now you're doing the Transformation Prison Project outside of jail. Tell people about what this program does,
Mm.
and how it helps people.
Yeah, so like I said earlier, the Transformational Prison Project was basically founded and rooted in like delivering restorative justice service to incarcerated people. But when I became the leader of this organization, which was last year, I've been only for a year and 4 months. It was at the height of COVID, and the prisons were closed. We couldn't go into any of the prisons, so we had to pivot. We didn't give up. I like to say we didn't give up. We grew up, and we actually started delivering restorative justice services out here on the other side of the wall. One thing that we realized when we were inside was that if Armand at 13 years old would have had the programming that I got at 40 years old, I wouldn't be in the prison. And that was our goal, to come out here and deliver those same services to 13-year-olds, 18-year-olds, anywhere we could interrupt the creator of the prison pipeline. And that's what we did. Today, we're not in the Department of Corrections, but we actually are starting to go in the House of Corrections, and we got a contract with the Department of Youth Services to go in and deliver those program services to children in which who we really wanted to interrupt in the beginning, right? So
Yeah,
that
I know.
thing, we got a contract with them, and we work with them. We also have a, a corporate thing we do where we actually deliver restorative justice leadership workshops to people who run corporations. Our biggest supporter being Redfin. The CEO of Redfin, like one of our biggest advocates. He's one of our first persons we ever did a corporate circle with, and
Wow.
biggest champions. And we do a lot of groups and workshops with law schools. As you know, Massachusetts, Boston is the hub. They're number one at that. That's where Boston is the best when it comes to law schools, right? Boston. I let them have that. So we work with all these law schools, and our goal is to get proximate to the future stewards of the legal system. I don't believe in systems. I believe in people. And now our theory is that the best way to change the system is to get proximate to those who want to be the future leaders of the system. Um,
Yeah, that's true.
yeah, because they're going to be the ones that's running it in 10 years.
Yeah.
And that's what we do.
Wow. That's
We got
amazing. Tell
a lot of the stuff we do in the community and all that too. And we literally just started February 26th, 22nd. We started the fellowship program, right? And the purpose of our fellowship program was to give women and men, like I said, because our program exists inside the prison still. And these men and women lead inside, just like we led when we were inside. But we
yeah.
had nowhere to go. So we try to build some place for them to go. So they come home, they actually get a fellowship that help them adjust, train, do what they have to do for 6 months to a year. And then if they feel ready and they want to, they can either add on to the organization in one capacity or another, or they can just go about starting their own thing. Because a lot of them are leaders, a lot of them have a lot of ideas, and
Hmm.
that's what I'm the most proud of. And just so you know, we're on a precipice of actually starting our first ever supportive living environment. We don't have to call it a halfway house. We don't want to call it a reentry house.
No,
It's
I
just
don't like that.
a house is going to be restorative justice, and we're going to apply it to the women and men who actually did our programming inside. So you'll come
That's
out.
so good.
Yeah, listen, I was in Boston. I came home. I was in the best halfway house that the city has to offer. They literally called my halfway house that I was in the Taj Mahal of halfway houses. But I'm telling you, I went to California and I viewed I visited a supportive living environment by another restorative organization, and I was like, I can't believe it. It was like night and day.
Oh, okay.
Kind of like remind people of the structures of prison. And it's triggering. It's
Hmm.
triggering. And having
Hmm.
and they don't and most of these houses they don't cater to the reentry needs, they cater to recovery needs. So if you ain't
Hmm.
issue, like I literally had to lie and say I had an addiction in order to go to a happy house in
Right.
1995. And I'm sitting there like, yeah, I'm an addict. Yeah, I mean, it was like nothing that was helpful to me. So
Yeah.
we know it doesn't exist, so we feel like we had to build it, and that's what we're
Hmm.
gonna.
Yeah. No, I worked in the system, so I know a lot more services for substance use, but just like the J. Cole has a line. Go ahead, sorry. Say that again.
Worked in what system? You saying?
Oh, like the mental health system and like trying to get people inpatient or into
Yeah,
in the homeless shelters, and some people would use just to get into a place.
exactly.
Um, which you know, but J. Cole has a line. He's my favorite artist. He says, "There's a suicide line, but who do you call? What's the line to call when you feel like you're gonna commit a homicide, right? Like when you're struggling." And so, with everything that this country does is very much about treating the symptom, not getting to the root of the problem.
Right.
But the country was designed, the prisons was created for slavery to continue by
Right.
any means necessary. So it did what it was designed to do, and you
Still
you
is.
know Yeah, it still is. And for you to get into the restorative project and be here today to share the story is truly amazing. Um, and I really hope people listening, especially if you know someone that has a similar story, like send this episode to them. Because I started this podcast because I wanted to give people hope. I always talk about how I struggled growing up and never thought like mental. I didn't know anything about mental health, emotions, none of that. And to be here now, like I had, I would come on and just share tell people that there's hope, but they would say, like, you're a therapist. So I was like, don't worry, I got you. Let me bring some other people on that ain't a therapist. And it's been such an amazing journey to help people learn. And so I'm just grateful to you for coming on and sharing about how you got here. Now, if people wanted to like donate or support the program, what is the website for the program?
www.transformprison.com or .org.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. Before you go, I would love to hear how you are taking care of yourself today in 2022.
Yeah. So I partake in restorative justice spaces all the time. Like
Mhm.
one thing that me and my team did, one of the first things that we did, we've been together to now for about a year and some change, is create a mental health space for ourselves. So
Mhm.
every Thursday, we just actually yielded that time or invited our fellows into that time where we would sit in space every day, every week, and process things that we were going through. Um,
Mhm.
um, One thing I'm also doing today is like I'm literally speaking to you on the eve of launching something we call the Youthful Offender Coalition. Like we
Wow.
recognize that youthful offenders have a totally different reentry needs than adult offenders. Just think about
Yeah.
prison. I was 17. I never lived a day as an adult. I came out. I literally didn't know how to write a check. I didn't know how to open a bank account. I didn't
Mhm.
know nothing.
Mhm.
Literally, it's like, and nobody was there to help me and to support me.
Mhm.
Um, Juices, and it's been a good credit to our own organization. Has led a lot of people who are youthful offenders.
Wow, that's awesome.
Youthful offenders exclusively, just to help them focus on their reentry needs and help them navigate the reentry process. But yeah, for me that's therapeutic because every space I get them to sit in, I sit in with them. Um, I,
Mm.
I don't think that restorative justice is therapy, but it's been therapeutic for me. It's a space that helped me heal, helped me grow, and I continue to use it. Um, that's why I continue to do it. I get more out of it than I think I'm giving into it.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Um, I appreciate you. Thank you for sharing your story. You guys make sure you visit the website. You'll find the links in the show notes to learn more about the Transformation Prison Project. So thank you. This was okay, right?
It's great. This is
Okay,
great.
good. Good,
I'm
good, good.
gonna make sure I send my Quinn invite to you immediately.